Captain Solon Vex was not a man easily impressed, especially by old floating hunks of metal. Arcadia, the peace station, was a relic itself, a decrepit symbol of humanity's attempts at diplomacy. The corridors echoed with a chorus of drips and groans, like an old man wheezing his last. Solon had seen better days in a junkyard. He walked through the station's rust-tinged halls with a stride that said, "I'm important, but I really wish I wasn't here." Behind him, Juno Cade, the ship's engineer, was muttering about the state of the station's guts. "This place is held together by stubbornness and rust," she grumbled, fiddling with a tool that looked like it had been borrowed from a medieval torture chamber. "Oh, cheer up," Solon said, sarcasm dripping from his voice like oil from a leaky engine. "We get to find ancient crap and save the universe. What could be better?" Juno snorted. "How about a station that doesn't smell like a skunk's armpit?" Lyra Tesson, the diplomat, was ahead, trying not to let her heels click too loudly on the metal floor. She turned and gave Solon a look that could melt steel. "Let's focus, gentlemen. We've got a bunch of emotionless aliens trying to pretend they have feelings." Solon raised an eyebrow. "Pretending to have emotions sounds like my last relationship." Juno laughed, earning a glare from Lyra. "Don't encourage him," Lyra said. "The Vyerks are serious about this. If they figure out how to simulate emotions, they might actually become competent negotiators. Or worse," Solon added, "they might become us." The Vyerks weren't exactly the life of any party. They were the kind of aliens who'd watch paint dry for fun if they understood the concept of fun. Their latest attempt at a peace conference was essentially a high-stakes poker game with no chips, no cards, and no clue. As they approached the conference room, a door slid open with a groan of metal that threatened to become a scream. Inside, the Vyerks delegation was waiting, tall, thin, and gray, like someone had stretched a human over a coat rack. Their leader had a name unpronounceable by human tongues, so Solon had dubbed him Gray Suit. "Ah, Captain Vex," Gray Suit said, his voice smooth as a politician's promise. "We have been expecting you." "I bet you have," Solon replied, giving his best "I'm not impressed" smile. "How's the emotional simulation going?" "You might want to start with sarcasm. It's quite the crowd pleaser." Gray Suit's eyes flickered briefly and attempted annoyance maybe. "We are making progress. Our research into human emotions is enlightening." "Enlightening," Solon grinned. "Just wait till you get to anger and regret. Those are real gems." Lyra stepped in, her diplomatic face firmly in place. "Captain Vex, perhaps we should focus on the matter at hand." "Right," Solon said, reluctantly turning his attention back to the Vyerks. "Let's cut to the chase. Why are you interested in human emotions?" Gray Suit's head tilted slightly. "To improve our negotiation tactics. We believe understanding emotions will allow us to better predict human responses." Juno burst out laughing, the sound as sudden as a malfunctioning airlock. "Oh, you poor naive bastards. You really think understanding emotions will make humans predictable? Good luck with that." Gray Suit did not blink, a marvelous trick considering he had no eyelids. "We shall see." Lyra shot Juno a warning look. "Captain, they need our assistance in gathering relics." "Of course they do," Solon said. "Because when you need to fake empathy, the best place to start is with ancient junk." The Vyerks had a theory. Somewhere in the bowels of Arcadia, among the forgotten relics of humanity's past, was something that could help them mimic emotions more effectively. It was as absurd as it sounded, but then, so was everything else about this diplomatic circus. Juno, ever the optimist, was inspecting the room's ancient wiring. "If you find the relic, maybe it'll tell us how to fix this mess of a station." "One problem at a time," Solon said. "First, we humor the Vyerks. Then we see what kind of mess we can make out of it." The meeting concluded with the Vyerks attempting a bow that looked more like a synchronized seizure. As the crew left the conference room, Solon asked, "So, Lyra, what's our real angle here? Besides not getting blown up, of course." "Survival," Lyra said, her voice low. "And maybe, just maybe, we can keep them from figuring out how to manipulate us." Because heaven forbid anyone knows what makes us tick, Juno added. We barely know that ourselves. Solon led them back down the corridor, the station's oppressive atmosphere doing its best to squeeze the life out of them. It was a bit like being inside a giant tin can that someone had forgotten to open. Here's the plan, Solon said. We find this relic, we make nice with the Vyarks, and then we get the hell off this rust bucket. And if the relic's just a broken toaster, Juno asked. Then we sell it as an ancient artifact, Solon replied with a shrug. No one said diplomacy had to be honest. They reached the station's lower levels where the air was thicker, the lights dimmer, and the smell of despair stronger than ever. It was a perfect place for anything pretending to be human to get a crash course in emotions. Welcome to the armpit of the universe, Solon muttered as they entered a chamber packed with forgotten relics. Juno started poking around, every clank and rattle echoing off the walls. This isn't engineering, it's archaeology. Dig deep enough, you might find a civilization, Solon said. Or at least something that looks like one. Lyra sifted through a pile of debris, her practiced diplomatic hands not above a bit of manual labor. What exactly are we looking for? No clue, Solon admitted. But I reckon we'll know it when we see it. There was silence as they picked through the room, each lost in their own thoughts. The air was heavy with the weight of history, or maybe just the stench of mildew. So if the Vyarks figure out emotions, Juno said, breaking the silence, what's next? Next, Solon replied, we teach them about taxes, bad relationships, and why we drink. Lyra chuckled softly, a rare sound. Probably best to start with the drinking, easier to swallow than emotions. Their search continued, a futile exercise in patience and hope. But that was humanity for you, always digging through the trash, hoping to find treasure. As Solon sifted through another pile of junk, his hand brushed against something cold and smooth. He pulled it out, holding it up for the others to see. It was a small, metallic cube, intricate designs etched into its surface. This looks promising, Juno said, eyeing it with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Lyra took it, her eyes narrowing in concentration. It might be what we're looking for, or it might explode, Solon said. Either way, it's better than nothing. They stood there, the weight of their mission hanging over them like a sword on a fraying thread. The Vyarks, the fate of the peace talks, the station itself, all of it balanced on their next move. Shall we see what this baby can do? Juno asked, her fingers itching to dismantle the cube's mysteries. Why not? Solon replied. We've got nothing to lose but our dignity, and maybe our lives. As Juno began to examine the cube, the dim lights flickered and an ominous hum filled the air. From the shadows, a pair of glowing eyes watched them, waiting for the moment to strike. Well, that's not ominous at all, Solon muttered, his hand instinctively going to his sidearm. I've got a bad feeling about this, Lyra said, her voice tense. As the hum grew louder, the chamber seemed to close in around them, the relics of the past whispering secrets only the dead could understand. The crew braced themselves for whatever twist was about to be thrown their way. The station, the relic, the Vyarks' ambitions, it was all coming to a head, and they were caught right in the middle of it. One wrong move, and the peace they'd fought so hard for could be shattered forever. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, they had a mystery cube and a room full of relics that might just hold the key to saving the day or blowing it all to hell. Either way, it was another day in the life of Captain Solon Vex. And he wouldn't have it any other way. The room felt even more claustrophobic with the air pregnant with danger. Solon could swear he heard the walls groaning, as if they too were fed up with the waiting. He glanced at Juno, who was doing some kind of mechanical foreplay with the cube, fingers prying at its seams like she could coax it open with sweet nothings. Meanwhile, Lyra looked like she was ready to leap into the next political quagmire, should it rear its ugly head. So, who votes we let Juno dismantle this little gizmo right here and now? Solon asked, trying to lighten the mood with a grin that was more grimace. Lyra shook her head. In case you've forgotten, Captain, we're in the middle of a peace negotiation that could decide the fate of human-alien relations. Maybe we shouldn't be mucking about with potentially explosive relics. Explosive. I prefer the term adventurously unpredictable, Juno said, eyes still glued to the cube. Adventurously unpredictable is what got us into this mess, Lyra shot back. And I don't fancy watching Peace Station turn into a fireworks display. Solon raised a placating hand. Easy, you two. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Juno, keep your hands off the fancy paperweight for now. We've got a bigger fish to fry. Speaking of frying, Juno quipped, who else thinks the Vyerks are cooking up something nasty with this emotion simulation crap? You mean besides the fact that they're trying to negotiate like they're auditioning for a soap opera? Solon replied. Yeah, I've got my suspicions. Suspicious. Lyra's voice was a mix of annoyance and concern, like a mother caught between scolding a child or hugging them. I call it outright manipulation. If they can mimic emotions, who's to say they can't turn us against each other? That's optimistic, Solon said dryly. Like we need alien help to do that. They were interrupted by the sound of something scuttling through the shadows, a noise that set everyone's nerves on edge. Solon's hand twitched towards his sidearm, eyes scanning for any signs of movement. But it was just the station settling, or maybe the ghosts of diplomats past. We need to make a call, Lyra said, her voice steely. Do we focus on this relic and whatever it might hold, or do we expose the Vyerks for the manipulative bastards they are? Why not both? Juno suggested, tilting her head at Solon. You're pretty good at juggling, right, Captain? Juggling. I'm barely keeping the plates from crashing down, Solon replied. But if anyone's got a better idea, I'd love to hear it. Before anyone could reply, Gray Suit's voice crackled over the intercom, smooth as a snake oil salesman. Captain Vex, we would like to resume the negotiations. We believe we are close to an understanding. Understanding, my ass, Juno muttered. They're just fine-tuning their deception skills. All right, we've got two objectives, Solon said, turning to his crew. We play along with the Vyerks for now, keep them thinking we're none the wiser. Meanwhile, Juno, see if you can find that rumored hidden chamber. If this cube's part of something bigger, maybe it can help tip the scales in our favor. On it, Juno nodded, determination lighting up her features. Guessing it's not down here, though. I'll start with the blueprints. Just keep it quiet, Solon said. Last thing we need is the Vyerks getting wind of it. They left the relic room, exchanging the stale, history-laden air for the slightly less oppressive corridors of the station. Solon was sure the lights dimmed just a little more, a testament to the station's refusal to maintain an acceptable level of functionality. In the conference room, the Vyerks were waiting, their expressions as unreadable as ever. Gray Suit, ever the figurehead of inscrutable alien intent, gestured for them to sit. Captain Vex, Gray Suit began, we believe we have made progress in understanding the subtleties of human emotions. Is that so? Solon leaned back, the picture of casual indifference. Care to share what you've learned? Gray Suit's eyes flickered, perhaps attempting a smile. Your species places a high value on sincerity and trust. Lyra stifled a laugh, poorly disguised as a cough. We also value not being stabbed in the back, she added sweetly. Gray Suit nodded, or at least did something that resembled agreement. Indeed. We are committed to maintaining honesty in these negotiations. Right, Solon said, because nothing says honesty like building an emotional Trojan horse. The Vyerks leader hesitated, as if searching for the right response from his new database of emotional understanding. Our goal is mutual benefit, Captain Vex. We seek peace. Solon wasn't buying it for a second, but he played the part. Of course, peace. The thing everyone wants and nobody believes in. The Vyerks were trying hard to simulate something akin to interest, leaning slightly forward as Lyra launched into a series of diplomatic niceties that would have made a politician proud. Meanwhile, Solon's mind was elsewhere, tracking Juno's progress through the station via a subtle nod from the communicator on his wrist. The meeting dragged on, filled with the usual pleasantries and half-truths. Solon was on autopilot, delivering lines from a script he'd memorized long ago, until Juno's voice crackled in his earpiece. Captain, "You might want to see this," she said, her voice low. Solin stood abruptly, interrupting whatever drivel gray suit was currently spouting. "Apologies, urgent matter," he said, trying not to sound too relieved at the excuse to leave. Lyra covered for him smoothly, engaging gray suit in another round of verbal fencing. Solin slipped out, making his way through the winding halls until he found Juno near what looked like an old maintenance hatch. "This station sure loves its secrets," Solin remarked as he approached. Juno nodded towards the hatch, her eyes alight with the thrill of discovery. "Blueprint said there's a chamber behind this wall, but it doesn't show up on any current maps. I bet my wrench it's hiding something." "Well, I never turned down a good bet," Solin said, gesturing for her to lead on. With a deft twist and a little coaxing, the hatch creaked open, revealing a narrow passageway barely wide enough for one person. They squeezed through, Solin's shoulders scraping against the metal with a sound like 100 nails on 100 chalkboards. The corridor led to a small chamber that seemed untouched by the years of neglect. In the center sat a console, its surfaces gleaming ominously under the emergency lights. It was designed with the same intricate patterns as the cube, suggesting they were indeed connected. "Looks like we found our treasure room," Juno said, her voice almost breathless with excitement. "Or a very elaborate death trap," Solin countered, though he couldn't deny the rush of adrenaline. Juno approached the console, her fingers already probing its surface with the care of a bomb technician. "If this does what I think it does, it might just be the leverage we need against the Vyerks." "And if it doesn't?" Solin asked. "Then we hope our luck hasn't run out just yet." As Juno worked, Solin's mind churned with possibilities. If the relic and the chamber were part of some ancient weapon or tool, it could change everything. But using it meant risking everything too, not least their already tenuous peace talks. They didn't have time on their side. If the Vyerks caught wind of what they were up to, it could spell disaster. But if they didn't act, the aliens might perfect their emotional manipulation and make humanity dance to their tune. "Any chance that thing has an instruction manual?" Solin asked, glancing at the console with a mix of hope and skepticism. Juno snorted. "If only, but I'm getting a feel for it. Might take a bit, but I think I can coax it to talk." "We've got to play this right," Solin said. "If this can expose the Vyerks or give us an edge, we use it. But not until we're sure what it's capable of." Juno nodded, her focus unwavering. "I'll work as fast as I can." "I'll keep the Vyerks busy," Solin replied, his mind already spinning with the double talk he'd need to keep up with Gray Suit and his poker-faced pals. As Solin made his way back to the conference room, he couldn't shake the feeling that the station itself was a living thing, watching, waiting, judging their every move. Their time was running out, and the delicate balance they'd managed to maintain was as precarious as ever. Back in the conference room, Lyra was holding her own, batting away Vyerk's inquiries with the skill of a diplomat who'd been in more than her share of tight corners. "Sorry about that," Solin said, sliding into his seat with a nod to Lyra. "Just a little station business." Gray Suit peered at him with that unsettling gaze. "We trust everything is in order, Captain Vex." "Everything's as orderly as it ever gets around here," Solin replied. "So, where were we?" The conversation resumed, the Vyerks trying to inch closer to their mysterious goal while Solin and Lyra danced around their intentions. But the humans had more cards up their sleeves than the Vyerks realized, and Solin was betting everything on Juno's success. As the talks dragged on, Solin couldn't help but wonder if they'd find the key to keeping humanity out of the Vyerks' grasp, or if they'd simply stumbled onto another path to ruin. Either way, they'd soon find out. And for better or worse, they were in it together, navigating the fine line between diplomacy and deception, action and inaction. Just another day in the universe's most dysfunctional family. The peace station was falling apart like a cheap suit in the rain, and Captain Solin Vex couldn't help but notice that it fit their mission perfectly. Who needed a functioning station when you had the galaxy's most dysfunctional diplomatic gathering? Solon kept his sarcasm on a simmer as he touched base with Juno, who was still delving into whatever mysteries the damned relic had to offer. "I'm telling you, Solon," Juno said, staring at the console like it had insulted her mother. "This thing has more layers than an onion, and it smells just as bad." "Great," Solon muttered, keeping one eye on the hatchway in case the Vyerks decided to drop by unannounced. "Any chance it's got a manual in here somewhere?" Juno rolled her eyes, fingers still dancing over the controls. "Sure, maybe in the fiction section. This thing's a puzzle box, and it's all about emotions. Different states, different patterns." "Perfect," Solon replied, deadpan. "Because we all know human emotions are so simple." Back in the conference room, Lyra was playing the role of diplomat with the finesse of a cat walking across a tightrope. The Vyerks were getting better at their emotional charades, but even a blind man could see they were still playing catch-up. "Captain Vex," gray suit intoned with the sincerity of a used airlock salesman, "we wish to express our desire for mutual understanding." "Right," Solon said, leaning back in the chair that looked like it might collapse under him just out of spite. Because nothing says understanding like suspiciously accurate emotional mimicry. Lyra shot him a look that could freeze helium. "We are, of course, committed to exploring these avenues alongside you," she said, smoothing over Solon's rough edges with all the grace of a professional politician. The Vyerks leader attempted what might have been a smile if aliens designed smiles by committee. "We are learning. Your emotions are complex." "Yeah, well, welcome to the human condition," Solon quipped. "Full of surprises, just like this station." Meanwhile, Juno was knee-deep in the relic's puzzles, which seemed to be a twisted love letter to human sentiment. Each section tested a different emotional response: anger, fear, joy, none of which were conveniently labeled. "This thing's like a mood ring from hell," Juno groused, her voice echoing across the narrow chamber. "Whoever built this wanted to make damn sure no one got through without a psych evaluation." "Great," Solon replied through the comms. "As if we didn't have enough emotional baggage." Juno chuckled darkly. "Well, good news." "Anger was a breeze. Anger's the easy one," Solon said. "It's the other stuff that gets tricky." Indeed, while Juno tackled the relic, Lyra was dealing with the diplomatic equivalent of herding cats. The human alliance was fraying at the seams as the Vyerk simulations became increasingly convincing. It was amazing what a little emotional manipulation could do. "Captain Vex," Gray Suit said, "we understand trust is paramount among your kind. We wish to earn it. Trust is like whiskey," Solon replied. "Hard to make, and not everyone can handle it." As the talks continued, Solon couldn't help but notice the cracks forming in their human coalition. People were beginning to doubt one another, their instincts clouded by the Vyerks' adept simulations. It was like watching a soap opera unfold in real time, only with more aliens and fewer commercial breaks. Meanwhile, Juno was making progress, though not without some colorful language. The puzzles were less about solving and more about feeling, each sequence requiring an emotional response she had to approximate. "This thing could give a psychiatrist a run for their money," Juno muttered, her fingers flying over the console like a pianist on a bender. "Just don't let it get to your head," Solon advised. "We need you sane enough to get us out of this mess." "Yeah. Well, sanity's overrated," Juno shot back, "especially on this floating junkyard." It was a sentiment Solon could relate to. The peace station felt less like a neutral ground and more like the universe's least successful attempt at an escape room. He just hoped they'd find their way out before everything went to hell. Back in the conference room, Lyra was attempting to steer the ship of diplomacy through increasingly choppy waters. The Vyerks were getting bolder, their simulations more refined, and it was clear they were eager to test their newfound emotional prowess. "We propose a joint initiative to further study our emotional responses," Gray Suit suggested, his tone as smooth as ever. "Study, huh?" Solon said. "That sounds less like cooperation and more like an experiment." "Captain," Lyra chided gently, "we appreciate the offer, but such initiatives require careful consideration." Indeed, Gray Suit replied, his alien eyes gleaming with what might have been interest. Your species is fascinating in its complexity. As long as you're fascinated and not dissecting, Solon quipped, though he wasn't entirely joking. Meanwhile, Juno had finally cracked the latest puzzle, a sequence that required an approximation of joy. Got it, she announced, her voice triumphant. What's next? Solon asked, keeping his tone casual while his heart pounded like a malfunctioning FTL drive. Not sure, Juno said, but whatever it is, it's not on the blueprints. Keep at it, Solon encouraged. If anyone can figure this out, it's you. Juno's voice softened. Thanks, Solon. I'll let you know if I find the instruction manual in the plot twist section. Back in the conference room, Solon and Lyra continued to spar with Gray Suit and his entourage, their words carefully chosen to maintain the delicate balance between honesty and deceit. The Vyerks were getting better at playing the game, but Solon could see the strain in their attempts to understand human emotion. How's it going in there? Solon muttered into his calm, though he kept his gaze on the Vyerks. I've got another piece of the puzzle, Juno replied. Problem is, each one gets trickier. Story of our lives, Solon said. At least we're used to it. They couldn't afford to slip up. The Vyerks were too close to perfecting their mimicry, and if they managed it, humanity would be at a severe disadvantage. They had to find a way to expose the deception without tearing the fragile alliance apart. Captain Vex, Gray Suit intoned, we seek only understanding. Solon forced a smile. We all do, Gray Suit. But some of us are better at faking it than others. With Juno working tirelessly on the relic and Lyra deftly navigating the diplomatic circus, Solon felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him like a black hole. They were dancing on a knife's edge, and one wrong step could send them all tumbling into the abyss. Any luck with the latest puzzle? Solon asked Juno, his mind racing with possibilities. Almost there, Juno replied, her voice tight with concentration. This one's a doozy, like trying to juggle emotions while holding a hot potato. Sounds about right, Solon said. Just make sure you juggle it over the trash. Lyra shot him another glance, one that said they were nearing the limits of both their patience and the peace talks. The Vyerks were making their move slowly but surely, and it was only a matter of time before they pushed too far. Captain Vex, Gray Suit said, that same practiced smoothness in his voice. We hope to reach a conclusion soon. Conclusion or collapse, Solon muttered under his breath. We'll see which comes first. As the meeting dragged on, it became increasingly clear that the Vyerks were trying to push them into some corner of emotional vulnerability. Solon knew they had to stay on guard, keep their intentions shielded behind a wall of cynicism and humor. Juno's voice broke into his thoughts. Got it. I've unlocked another section and I think I'm onto something big. About time we caught a break, Solon replied, a hint of relief in his tone. What are we looking at? Looks like a control interface, Juno said, excitement bubbling up. If I'm right, it might let us override their emotional simulations. Then we've got to use it, Solon said, heart skipping a beat. Before they realize what we're up to, with the new development they had a potential ace up their sleeve, but it was a risky play. They couldn't afford to tip their hand too soon, not with the Vyerks watching their every move like a hawk. Lyra, sensing the shift in the room, fixed Gray Suit with a calm, collected gaze. We'll need time to review your proposal in full. Understanding is a two-way street after all. Yes, Gray Suit agreed. We understand your caution, more like they understood how to play the waiting game. But Solon wasn't about to let them win it. With Juno making progress on the relic, they had a chance to turn the tide, but they had to act swiftly and decisively. Keep working on that interface, Solon instructed Juno. If we can use it to our advantage, we might just level the playing field. Consider it done, Captain, Juno replied, determination lacing her words. The conference dragged on, a dull thud of diplomatic doublespeak, but Solon knew the real battle was happening behind the scenes. With Juno's discovery, they had a glimmer of hope, a chance to expose the Vyrex's manipulations before things spiraled out of control. Captain Vex, gray suit, said, breaking into Salen's thoughts once more. We look forward to continued dialogue. Oh, I'm sure we'll have plenty to say, Salen replied, his voice dripping with irony. Just give us time to find the right words. As the meeting adjourned, Salen felt a strange sense of relief mixed with trepidation. They were standing on the precipice of something big, and the next steps would determine not just their fates, but the future of their fledgling alliance. One step at a time, Captain, Juno said, as if sensing his thoughts. We'll get through this. For better or worse, Salen agreed, a wry smile tugging at his lips. And with that, they plunged back into the thick of it, ready to face whatever fresh hell awaited them on the path to peace, or perhaps, more likely, to war. Juno Cade was knee-deep in the bowels of Arcadia, the peace station with all the charm of a rusting garbage scow. The relic she was working on seemed determined to make her life hell, and if it wasn't so potentially explosive, she might have appreciated its dedication to the job. Seriously, she muttered, poking at the console, this thing's got more personality than my last boyfriend. Captain Salen Vex crackled through her earpiece. More explosive too, I bet. Only if you count emotional blow-ups, Juno shot back, trying not to laugh as she focused on the relic's latest trick. This cube's like a therapy session on steroids. Well, don't get too comfortable on that couch, Salen said. We've got bigger issues. Bigger than an emotional Rubik's Cube. Juno asked, arching an eyebrow at the console as it whirred ominously. Color me intrigued. Conference is going to pot, Salen replied, his voice layered with the kind of sarcasm that could cut glass. The Vyerks have cranked their simulations up to 11. It's like watching a bad rom-com. Everyone's suddenly in the mood for compromise. Guess we're the only ones not feeling the love, Juno said, adjusting the console's output with a deft twist. What's Lyra doing about it? Trying to keep the human coalition from turning into a sitcom, Salen replied dryly. The Vyerks are pushing for a final agreement, and she's doing her best to remind everyone that it's not all sunshine and simulated rainbows. Good luck with that, Juno murmured, flicking a switch to reveal another layer of the cube. The way this thing's wired, I'm surprised it doesn't come with a mood ring app. She could almost hear Salen rolling his eyes. Keep at it. We need to be ready for whatever the Vyerks throw our way. As if on cue, the peace station's automated defenses decided to flex their neglected muscles. A series of klaxons blared to life, echoing through the metal corridors like angry sirens at a rave. Now what? Juno growled, trying to maintain her composure as the station seemed to shake itself awake. Seems Arcadia's got a thing for drama, Salen said, his tone resigned. The defenses are reacting to emotional spikes. Great. Just what we need, a station with PMS, Juno quipped, trying to keep her focus on the relic as the ship shuddered around her. Watch yourself. We don't know how sensitive this thing is, Salen warned, his voice a steady anchor. Last thing we need is to accidentally set it off. Juno nodded, though she knew he couldn't see. I'm on it. Just keep those Vyerks busy with their soap opera. Back in the conference room, Lyra Tessin was doing her best impression of a diplomat who hadn't just aged a decade in the past Ior. The Vyerks were pressing hard, their simulated interest in human emotions getting under her skin like a bad itch. We hope this agreement will usher in a new era of cooperation, gray suit intoned, with the kind of sincerity that would have made a used car salesman blush. Cooperation's always nice, Lyra replied smoothly, her eyes locked onto gray suit's featureless face. But it only works if both sides are genuine. Of course, gray suit agreed, though the words rolled off his tongue like oil. We assure you our intentions are pure, sure, Lyra said, matching his oily tone with one of her own. Pure as a politician's promises. She could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of expectation pressing down like a ton of space debris. The Vyerks were good, too good. Their simulations were reaching a level of sophistication that was unsettling, and it was making the delegates squirm like worms on a hook. Meanwhile, Solon was tapping into every reserve of patience he had left, which wasn't much. The peace station was creaking under the strain, and it wasn't just the rusty old infrastructure. Emotions were running high, and the automated defenses were reacting like a dog that had been kicked one too many times. "How's Juno doing?" Lyra asked, keeping her voice low enough so only Solon could hear. "Better than us, I think," Solon replied, glancing at the Vyarks who were observing the proceedings with detached curiosity. "She's wrestling that relic into submission. Hopefully it gives us something we can use. We're going to need it," Lyra said, her voice tight. "The Vyarks aren't just simulating emotions, they are manipulating them." "Story of our lives," Solon muttered, crossing his arms as he leaned back in his chair. "They're like politicians with tentacles," Lyra snorted, which drew a curious glance from one of the Vyark's delegates. She quickly masked it with a cough. "Let's just survive this meeting. We can deal with the fallout later. Survival's my specialty," Solon said with a smirk. "Dealing with fallout, not so much." As the meeting droned on, Juno finally felt the relic give way to her probing. It was like cracking open a particularly stubborn walnut, and she didn't even have a nutcracker. The cube hummed, revealing an interface that glowed with possibilities and dangers. "Solon, I've got something," she announced, her voice crackling with triumph. "Looks like a control interface that could override the Vyarks' emotional simulations." "About bloody time we caught a break," Solon replied, his voice laced with relief. "Think you can use it without blowing us all to hell?" "Give me a little credit," Juno said, her fingers flying over the console as she adjusted the settings. "I'll just pretend it's a particularly finicky toaster. Make sure it doesn't burn the toast then," Solon quipped, trying to keep his tone light even as his mind raced with possibilities. Meanwhile, the peace station's mood swings continued, the automated defenses reacting to the emotional ebb and flow with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The meeting room door shuddered as the station adjusted to yet another spike, the lights flickering ominously. Captain Vex, gray suit, said, as if oblivious to the chaos around them. "Or maybe just indifferent. We trust you will see the value in our proposal." "Trust is a funny thing," Solon replied, his tone unyielding. "It's a lot like gravity, easy to fall into but a hell of a climb back out." Gray suit nodded as if considering this. "We believe trust should be nurtured like a garden, or a weed," Solon said, not missing a beat. "Depends on what you're growing." Lyra bit back a smile, focusing once more on maintaining calm amidst the storm. "We'll need some time to consider all angles." "A rushed decision benefits no one, of course," Gray Suit agreed, though there was an edge to his voice that hadn't been there before. "We await your response." As the delegates filed out, Solon and Lyra shared a look that spoke volumes. They were walking a tightrope over an abyss, and the Vyarks were busy sawing away at the rope. "I need a drink," Lyra confessed once they were alone in the corridor. "Or 5, Solon chuckled. "Make it 6 and I'm in." They headed toward the command center where Juno was still knee-deep in tech wizardry. The relic hummed soothingly as her fingers danced over the console, coaxing it into revealing its secrets. "How's the toaster?" Solon asked, leaning against the door frame. "Piping hot," Juno replied, her eyes glinting with mischief. "It's got a lot of settings, though. Might need a test run." "Let's not get carried away," Lyra said, eyeing the relic with the suspicion she normally reserved for tax collectors. "We don't know how the Vyarks will react if we tamper with their tech." "True," Juno conceded. "But if they're going to play dirty, it's only fair we give them a taste of their own medicine." "Revenge is a dish best served cold," Solon said with a grin. "But we'll take whatever the microwaves got ready." The trio pondered their next move, the relic humming softly like a contented cat. Solon could feel the tension in his muscles, the stress of command weighing heavily on him like an anchor. "We need to expose them," Lyra said, her voice firm. "If the other delegates see the Vyarks' manipulations, their leverage crumbles." "Right," Juno said, tapping a few more keys. "I'll set it to reveal their simulations in bursts. Should be enough to start making people question what they're seeing." Do it, Solon instructed, his mind racing with all the ways it could go wrong. And let's hope it's enough to turn the tide. As Juno worked her magic, the command center crackled with energy, the peace station's defenses humming in sync with the relic. It was a gamble, a big one, but they were out of options. They had to level the playing field before the Vyerks closed the deal for good. Any chance this thing comes with a manual? Solon asked, half-jokingly. Juno snorted. Manuals are for amateurs. Real engineers wing it and hope for the best. Words to live by, Solon replied, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it. They watched as Juno activated the override, the relic's glow intensifying as it unleashed its hidden power. Across the station, lights flickered, and the temperature dipped as the Vyerks' emotional simulations were briefly disrupted. "Looks like it's working," Juno said, her voice tinged with satisfaction. "Let's see how they like a taste of their own medicine." The Vyerks wouldn't know what hit them, but Solon knew it was just the beginning. The stakes were higher than ever, and they were dancing on the edge of a blade. One misstep and it was game over. But for now, they had the upper hand, however momentary. And in the grim darkness of Arcadia, that was worth celebrating. "Cheers to the unexpected," Solon said, raising an imaginary glass. To surprises, Lyra agreed, her smile bittersweet. To making toast, Juno added with a wink. And with that, they braced for the storm to come, ready to meet it head-on with all the wit and grit humanity had to offer. The peace station was groaning under the weight of its own dysfunction, a place so old and cranky it made your granddad's arthritis seem like a minor annoyance. Solon Vex was in the bowels of the station, elbow-deep in a console that looked like it had been built by a drunk engineer on a 5-day bender. "Any luck with that thing, Juno?" Solon called out, his voice bouncing off the metal walls. "Because it's not really the best time for an impromptu electrical barbecue. Working on it," Juno replied, her voice crackling through the comms. "If this relic had a voice, I'm pretty sure it'd be screaming for an exorcist." "Great. Let's just hope it doesn't decide to purge us instead." The station shuddered again, the kind of ominous rattle that made you wonder if gravity was about to call it quits. The automated defenses were still having their emotional meltdown, reacting to every spike as if someone had just insulted their mother. "Why do I feel like I'm trapped in a soap opera with a death wish?" Solon muttered, twisting another wire into place. "It's like the station is trying to outdo the Vyerks in drama. Maybe it's just trying to keep up," Juno suggested. "You know how machines get about being outperformed." "Yeah, but I prefer my machines quiet and obedient, not auditioning for the role of angry malfunctioning death trap." Meanwhile, Lyra was in the conference room, playing the reluctant lead in an ongoing tragedy. The Vyerks were pressing her harder than a juice machine, their emotion simulations skating the fine line between creepy and comical. "We believe a mutual understanding is within reach," Gray Suit cooed, his voice as smooth as an oiled eel. "And I believe in flying pigs," Lyra shot back, her smile sharper than a vibroblade. "But let's not kid ourselves." The Vyerks delegate tilted his head in a mimicry of curiosity. "Skepticism is an understandable human trait. It's a survival mechanism," Lyra replied. "You develop one too if you had to negotiate with people who can't decide if they are Vulcans or bad actors." Back in the guts of the station, Solon cursed under his breath as a shower of sparks erupted from the console. "Juno, if you've got any miracles left up your sleeve, now's the time." "I'm doing my best," she replied, an edge of frustration seeping into her voice. "This thing's like trying to defuse a bomb while riding a bull." "Just don't let the bull win," Solon said, squinting through the smoke. "I'd like to get out of this alive, thank you very much." The station shuddered again, a distant alarm wailing somewhere in the labyrinthine corridors. Solon could practically feel the station's infrastructure weeping under the strain. "In case you hadn't noticed, Juno, the station's trying to kill us." "Gee, I hadn't noticed," Juno retorted. "Must be all the fun we're having distracting me." Fun was a relative term, Solon mused, reassembling the console with the kind of determination that only comes from absolute desperation. If you can stabilize that relic, maybe we can shut down these defenses before they decide to end their misery by taking us with them. You're a ray of sunshine, Solon, Juno commented dryly. That's why they made me captain, didn't you hear? Solon shot back. My people's skills. As they worked, the relic pulsed ominously, a reminder that even their toys had teeth. Solon was convinced it was silently mocking them. Or maybe that was just him projecting. Either way, the damn thing was as temperamental as a cat on bath day. How are we doing, Juno? Solon asked, trying to ignore the ominous creaks echoing through the station. Ask me again in 5 minutes, Juno replied. Or don't, I might still be swearing. I'll pencil that in, Solon said. Try not to blow us to hell in the meantime. Inspiring as always, Captain. Meanwhile, Lyra was putting on her best diplomatic face while internally contemplating whether the Vyerks would notice if she kicked one of them under the table. We appreciate your commitment to this endeavor, Gray Suit said, his voice smoother than a con artist on payday. Your appreciation means the universe to me, Lyra replied, deadpan. In fact, I'm overwhelmed by your sincerity. We aim to please, Gray Suit replied, his expression unreadable as ever, which was to say, as expressive as a brick wall. Lyra was starting to think she'd rather negotiate with the peace station's automated defenses. At least they had the decency to be straightforward about wanting to kill you. Back in the bowels of the station, Solon and Juno were making slow progress, the relic finally starting to respond to their efforts. I think I've got it, Juno announced, her voice tinged with hope. It's not pretty, but it might just work. I'll take not pretty over completely screwed any day, Solon replied. Do your thing. Juno manipulated the console with careful precision, the relic humming ominously in response. Solon held his breath, his heart pounding like a drum, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The station shuddered again, but this time the defenses seemed to hesitate, the relentless barrage of malfunctions tapering off like a grumpy landlord realizing they'd forgotten to collect the rent. Looks like it's working, Juno said, her voice dripping with relief. We might just survive this after all. Don't tempt fate, Solon warned, though he couldn't keep the smile from his face. Let's focus on getting out of here in one piece. The relic buzzed softly, its energy pulsing like a heartbeat, a strange comfort amidst the chaos. Solon knew they weren't out of the woods yet, but for the first time, it felt like they'd found a path through the trees. In the conference room, Lyra was holding her ground, the Vyerks' simulated emotions starting to waver as the relic worked its magic. We would like to continue these discussions, Gray Suit said, a hint of strain in his voice as the simulations faltered. Discussions are good, Lyra agreed, her eyes narrowing. Just as long as we're all playing fair. Of course, Gray Suit replied, though his voice had lost some of its oily charm. Lyra hid her satisfaction, knowing that the balance had shifted in their favor, at least for the moment. Trust was a fragile thing, but it was enough to keep them on their feet. Back with Solon and Juno, the relic finally seemed to settle down, its ominous hum smoothing out into a steady rhythm. Looks like we're back in business, Juno said, stepping back from the console with a sigh of relief. Music to my ears, Solon replied, feeling the tension drain from his body. Now, let's see if we can keep this party going. They emerged from the depths of the station, making their way towards the conference room where Lyra was holding her own against the Vyerks. It's been a hell of a day, Solon remarked as they walked, the station still groaning around them like an old man complaining about his rheumatism. Just another day in paradise, Juno quipped, shaking her head. I swear if this station were a person, I'd punch it in the face. Get in line, Solon said with a chuckle. But for now, let's focus on getting through this without becoming space debris. As the trio reunited in the conference room, they exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. They were in this together, no matter how grim the odds. Lyra nodded to Solon, gratitude in her eyes. Looks like you managed to pull a rabbit out of the hat after all. More like a ferret, Solon replied, but I'll take it. The Vyerks were still adjusting, their simulations faltering as the relic's influence took hold. It was a small victory, but one that gave them a foothold amidst the chaos. We're not out of the woods yet, Solon reminded his team, his voice steady with resolve. But we've got a fighting chance. Juno nodded, her confidence bolstered by their success. And that's more than we had an hour ago. Exactly, Lyra agreed, her eyes focused on the Vyerks. Now let's make sure they don't recover their footing. The relic's power was a double-edged sword, one that could cut both ways if they weren't careful. But for now, it was on their side, and they intended to make the most of it. As the meeting continued, Solon and his crew braced for the next round, their trust in one another as strong as ever. They'd been through hell and back, and they weren't about to let a bunch of emotionally confused aliens get the better of them. To trust, Solon said quietly, raising an imaginary toast once more. To us, Juno replied, her smile as sharp as ever. And to the unexpected, Lyra added, a glint of determination in her eyes. They faced the Vyerks with renewed vigor, ready to see this through to the end, whatever that might bring. In the grim reality of the peace station, they were learning that trust was their greatest weapon, and they intended to wield it to the fullest. The peace station groaned like a drunk with a hangover, and Solon Vex wasn't feeling much better. A nice, quiet collapse would have been just peachy, but of course, Arcadia had to go out kicking and screaming. Somewhere deep within its rusting innards, the relic pulsed like a migraine, an emotional bomb waiting to go off, and Vex and Juno were the lucky disarmament team. Juno, Solon said, his voice tinged with the kind of calm that comes from total exasperation. Please tell me you've cracked this thing, because I'm about one creak away from just letting it all implode. Juno was elbow-deep in wires and glowing bits, frowning like she'd just been told Christmas was canceled. I think I've got it, she replied, her tone rife with the optimism of a gambler on their last chip. This relic, it's not just for show. It doesn't just simulate emotions, it amplifies them. We could use it to turn those Vyerk simulations into a bad dream. Amplifies emotions, Solon echoed. Just what we need, more feelings, like there's not enough tension in this tin can already. It's our best shot, Juno insisted, her fingers dancing across the console. If we can disrupt their simulations, we might just knock them off their perfectly balanced, emotionless pedestals. Just make sure you don't knock us off too, Solon muttered, eyeing the relic like it might sprout legs and dance a jig. Last thing I need is this place collapsing around our ears. Working on it, Juno replied, her voice steady despite the looming chaos. Let's hope this doesn't end with us becoming a footnote in a very boring diplomatic incident. Meanwhile, Lyra was in the conference room, clinging to diplomacy like a cat to a scratching post. The Vyerks smugly observed her struggle, their simulated expressions flickering like an old holovid projector. Lyra took a deep breath, composing her face into the picture of diplomatic serenity, so long as you ignored the twitch in her left eye. Gray suit, she said, addressing the Vyerks delegate with all the sincerity of a used car salesperson. Let's cut the crap. You're not fooling anyone with your karaoke version of human emotions. We both know this is going south faster than a lead balloon. Gray suit gave her a look that was supposed to convey mild annoyance, but landed somewhere around constipated. Our simulations are operating within expected parameters, MS, Tessin. We are equipped to handle fluctuations. Maybe, Lyra said, leaning forward, but I think your parameters are about to hit a snag. Back in the station's mechanical bowels, Solon and Juno worked in tandem, a symphony of curses and sparks flying between them. As Juno adjusted the relic, it emitted a low hum, a sound that made Solon's teeth itch. Well, here goes nothing, Juno said, throwing a switch with the kind of flourish usually reserved for stage magicians. The relic pulsed, and for a moment the entire station seemed to hold its breath. Solon could feel the eerie calm, like the moment before a lightning strike, and then everything seemed to snap back into motion. The station shuddered, its metal bones groaning in protest, but the automated defenses, those lovely little death traps, hesitated, then fell silent. "I think it worked," Juno announced, her voice a mix of relief and disbelief. "We've disrupted their simulations, for now." "Don't get too comfortable," Solon replied, eyes scanning the console like a hawk staring down an unwary rabbit. "This station's been through hell and back. It might decide to give up the ghost just for spite." As if to punctuate his words, Arcadia let out a metallic whine, but the catastrophic collapse Solon feared didn't come. It seemed the station had decided to give them a brief reprieve, or maybe it was just catching its breath for the next round. In the conference room, the effects of their handiwork were becoming apparent. Gray Suit blinked, his simulated veneer cracking ever so slightly. "We are experiencing temporary technical difficulties," he said, his tone as smooth as a gravel path. "Temporary, huh?" Lyra said, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Well, I'm sure you'll sort it all out. After all, you're the experts, right?" Gray Suit's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, struggling to maintain composure as his simulations faltered. It was a small victory, but in the grand scheme of things, Lyra would take any victory she could get. "How's it going in there?" Solon's voice crackled through Lyra's earpiece, as dry as a desert. "Swimmingly," Lyra replied, her sarcasm on full display. "I think Gray Suit might break out into a rendition of Tears of a Clown any minute now." "Wouldn't that be a treat?" Solon said. "Just keep buying us time. Juno's got the relic under control and we're trying not to blow ourselves up." "Well, try harder," Lyra shot back. "I'd rather not explain to Command how we ended up as space dust." Lyra returned her focus to the Vyarks, who were floundering like fish in a net. It was almost funny watching them struggle to maintain their facade. Almost. The relic's influence was clear, their simulated emotions flickering and fading like a dying light. It was risky, but for now, it was working. The balance was shifting, and Lyra intended to make the most of it. Back with Solon and Juno, the relic was finally behaving, its hum less ominous and more like a cat's purr. Solon could almost breathe easy, though he knew better than to let his guard down completely. "Nice job, Juno," he said, clapping her on the shoulder. "Now let's make sure this thing doesn't decide to throw a tantrum." Juno nodded, her eyes focused and determined. "I'll keep an eye on it. You just keep those Vyarks off our backs." "You got it," Solon replied, his mind already turning to their next move. "Let's keep this circus rolling." As they made their way back towards the conference room, Solon couldn't help but reflect on the day's events. It had been rough, no doubt about it, but they were still standing, and in this line of work that was saying something. They rejoined Lyra, who was keeping the Vyarks on their toes, or whatever it was they had. Solon exchanged a nod with her, a silent acknowledgement of the ground they'd gained. "Looks like you've got them on the ropes," he said, leaning casually against the wall. "More like they're tying themselves in knots," Lyra replied, her grin as sharp as ever. Gray Suit was trying valiantly to regain control, but the relic's influence was proving too much. Their simulated emotions were unraveling, and with them, their carefully constructed facade. Seeing their chance, Lyra pressed forward. "So, Gray Suit, how about we discuss some real terms? You know, before your programming sends you into a full-on existential crisis." The Vyarks delegate hesitated, their confidence waning. It was a precarious moment, and Lyra could feel the tension, like a string pulled too tight. But she held her ground, knowing that this was their best shot at turning the tables. We are open to further negotiations," Gray Suit finally said, his voice strained as he struggled to maintain composure. "Good," Lyra replied, her tone firm, "because we're not leaving until we reach an understanding, one that doesn't involve you playing God with emotions you don't even understand." Gray Suit's eyes narrowed, but he nodded, a reluctant agreement to continue. The balance had shifted, and for the first time it felt like the humans had the upper hand. Solon watched the exchange, feeling the weight of the moment. They'd come a long way, but he knew better than to celebrate prematurely. Still, it was a start, and in the grim darkness of space, sometimes that was all you could ask for. "Let's keep this momentum going," Solon said, addressing his crew. "We're not out of the woods yet, but we've got a fighting chance." Lyra nodded, her eyes fixed on the Vyerks. "We'll keep the pressure on. They're not as infallible as they think, and it's about time they learned that." Juno, ever the optimist, added, "And if they don't, well, we've got a relic that says otherwise." As the meeting resumed, the tension was palpable, but there was a new sense of determination among the humans. They'd faced the impossible and come out with more than they'd dared to hope for. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time it felt like they were heading in the right direction. In the dim light of the conference room, Solon raised an imaginary toast, his voice steady and sure. "To making the impossible possible." His crew echoed the sentiment, their resolve unwavering. They faced the future with a renewed sense of purpose, their bond stronger for the trials they'd endured. Whatever lay ahead, they were ready. Together, they'd forge a path through the darkness, one step at a time. And as the peace station groaned its reluctant approval, they knew they wouldn't face the challenges alone. "We've got this," Solon said, his voice full of conviction. And for the first time in a long time, it felt true. Solon Vex stared at the glowing relic, a cube of seemingly innocuous metal that was currently the most dangerous thing on Peace Station. Juno Cade was fiddling with its settings like a kid playing with fireworks in a gas station. Solon had always appreciated her optimism, but hoped it wouldn't get them vaporized. "Juno, you sure you know what you're doing?" Solon asked, arms crossed, one eyebrow arched as if trying to climb off his forehead. "Define sure," Juno quipped, not looking up as she tweaked a few more dials. "It's like cooking, you know. You just add a pinch of this, a dash of that, and hope it doesn't explode in your face." "Great. We're cooking with live grenades," Solon said. His voice was dry enough to make a desert blush. The relic pulsed again, this time with a brighter intensity, casting strange shadows on the walls of Arcadia. Solon swore he saw one shadow wave at him. He decided, for sanity's sake, to pretend it didn't happen. Back in the conference room, Lyra Tessin was still working the crowd, if you could call a roomful of emotionless aliens a crowd. The Vyerks were struggling to keep their simulated emotions from turning into a digital meltdown. Gray Suit, their lead delegate, looked like someone had swapped his personality program with a glitchy toaster. "So, Gray Suit," Lyra said, her tone as sweet as cyanide-laced candy, "about those negotiations. How's the whole empathy thing working out for you?" Gray Suit's humanoid eyes flickered again, his expression somewhere between bewilderment and firmware failure. "Our calculations indicate a significant anomaly." "Yeah, we call that feeling," Lyra shot back, leaning back in her chair, looking as relaxed as a snake in a mouse house. Gray Suit opened his mouth to respond, but whatever simulation he was running just couldn't keep up with the sudden rush of authentic human emotion being broadcasted from the relic. His face contorted, struggling to understand the illogical mess that was human sentiment. "Solon, I think we've got them on the ropes." Juno's voice crackled in Solon's earpiece, full of barely contained excitement. "The relic's broadcasting emotions like a radio DJ on amphetamines." "Good. Let's turn up the volume," Solon replied, eyeing the relic as if daring it to do its worst. "Right," Juno muttered, fingers dancing over the glowing controls. "Let's see if we can't make these aliens feel like the dysfunctional family reunion they never wanted." Back in the conference hall, the effects were becoming comically apparent. Gray Suit's once calm demeanor was now a rapidly shifting mess of anger, fear, and confusion. Emotions he'd never felt were suddenly swirling through his circuits, and it was like watching a robot try to dance at a rave. Lyra leaned forward, her voice low and dangerous. "How about we call it a day before this turns into an interstellar therapy session?" Gray Suit blinked, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape hatch. We must recalibrate. This is unprecedented." "No kidding, Einstein," Lyra said, barely suppressing a chuckle. "Take all the time you need to get your existential crisis sorted out." We'll be here. Solon and Juno, meanwhile, were watching Arcadia's structural integrity go from questionable to abandon hope all ye who enter. The station groaned ominously, as if complaining about its impending collapse. Juno, how's it looking? Solon asked, his voice a mix of concern and gallows humor. Like the morning after a frat party, Juno replied, giving the console a few reassuring taps. We've got the Vyerks on their knees, but we need to get out of here before this whole place decides to implode. Right, Solon nodded, glancing around at the rattling walls. Let's get moving before Peace Station lives up to its name and gives us an eternal peace. As the relic continued its emotional onslaught, the Vyerks delegates were struggling to maintain any semblance of control. Gray Suit's facade had crumbled, replaced by a chaotic mishmash of genuine feelings. It was both tragic and hilarious, depending on your perspective. Solon and Juno made their hurried way to the conference room, their footsteps echoing ominously down the corridor. The station shivered around them, making Solon feel uncomfortably like a flea riding a dying dog. Lyra, we need to get out of here, Solon said as soon as he reached the conference room. This place is not going to hold much longer. Lyra nodded, her eyes on the Vyerks, who were in the midst of a collective breakdown. All right, time to wrap this up. Gray Suit, we're gonna keep this little emotional enlightenment between us, okay? Let's not make it any more complicated than necessary. Gray Suit, processing this new emotional data, nodded shakily. Agreed. We shall continue discussions under more controlled circumstances. Great. Now if you'll excuse us, we've got to leave before this station turns us into cosmic confetti, Solon said, motioning for his team to follow. As they made their escape, the station continued its symphony of protest. Panels fell, lights flickered, and somewhere deep within the bowels of the station, a klaxon wailed mournfully. It was like the universe's worst alarm clock. Despite the chaos, the team moved with purpose, their steps quick and sure. They had faced worse odds and come out alive, but Solon knew better than to tempt fate by getting cocky now. Why do I get the feeling this station has a personal vendetta against us? Juno quipped as they dodged falling debris. It's called anthropomorphizing, Juno, Solon replied dryly. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's conspiring against us. Lyra was already at the docking bay, sealing the diplomatic victory as she stepped onto their ship. The engines hummed to life, a comforting sound against the backdrop of the failing station. All right, everyone buckle in, Solon ordered, sliding into the pilot's chair. Let's get the hell out of here. The ship shuddered as it disengaged from Peace Station, pulling away just as another section of the station's exterior gave way, spilling debris into the void. As they cleared the immediate danger zone, Solon allowed himself a small sigh of relief. They'd done it. They'd managed to pull off the impossible and live to tell the tale. So, what's next? Lyra asked, her voice a complicated mix of exhaustion and triumph. Next, Solon said, rubbing a hand over his face to wipe away the day's tension, we file a report full of big words and vague promises to reassure command that we didn't screw everything up. And then, Juno asked, leaning back in her seat, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. And then, Solon replied, we find the nearest bar and drink until these memories become someone else's problem. Lyra chuckled, shaking her head. Sounds like a plan, but first, let's make sure command doesn't hang us out to dry. With the station disappearing behind them, its structural failure now someone else's headache, they turned their ship towards their next destination. The mission might be over, but the implications would take some time to unravel. But for now, they could afford a moment's respite. They'd face down one of the galaxy's more insidious threats and come out on top. That was no small feat, and it deserved at least a moment's reflection before the next crisis landed in their laps. As the ship cruised through the empty expanse of space, Solon took a moment to appreciate the silence. It was a rare commodity in their line of work, and he intended to savor it while it lasted. Hey, Solon, Juno said, breaking the silence, you ever think we're just a bit too good at this for our own good? Solon grinned, adjusting their course for home. "There's no such thing, Juno. We're just the right amount of good, and I wouldn't have it any other way." They shared a laugh, the kind that comes from relief and the knowledge that they'd managed to cheat fate once more. The universe might be a dark and dangerous place, but as long as they had each other, they'd find a way to keep going. "To surviving another day," Solon said, raising an imaginary toast. "To surviving," Lyra and Juno echoed, their voices full of camaraderie and the promise of future adventures. And with that, they settled in for the journey home, ready to face whatever the cosmos decided to throw at them next. They'd survive the chaos of Peace Station, and they'd face whatever came next with the same irreverent determination. Because in the end, that's all they could do. Keep moving forward, keep fighting, and keep laughing in the face of the universe's endless absurdity. And if they were lucky, they'd keep surviving, one day at a time. As the ship cruised away from Peace Station, a glorified tin can with ideas above its station, Sol and Vex couldn't help but admire the view. Not the station itself, mind you, but the way it disintegrated with such enthusiasm behind them. Panels flapped like drunken seagulls caught in a storm, and clouds of space debris made a compelling argument for ducking. "That was close," Juno remarked with a grin, her fingers tapping the console's armrest as if it were a piano and she was unleashing some jazz hell on it. Her optimism was as indestructible as Peace Station was not. "Yeah," Solon replied, steering them clear of the wreckage. "Next time, remind me to ask for hazard pay." Lyra, slouched in the co-pilot seat, let out a snort. "You'd have more luck squeezing blood from a stone, Solon. Command's tighter than a miser's purse." The ship's interior was cramped, filled with the kind of comforting clutter that screamed home or hoarder's haven, depending on your mood. This was their sanctuary, the only place where sarcasm was the native language and everyone had mastered the dialect. Gray Suit's meltdown still played on Solon's mind, like a bad movie he couldn't stop replaying. The Vyerks had ventured boldly into the unpredictable territory of human emotion and promptly tripped on the welcome mat. "Think they'll ever figure out this whole emotion thing?" Juno asked, as if reading Solon's mind. "Depends," Solon mused. "Right now they're like toddlers trying to perform brain surgery. Best they can manage is finger painting. And they still charge like surgeons," Lyra added, her tone dripping with well-practiced cynicism. The relic had been the real wild card. Whoever thought a glowing metal cube could be the universe's most dysfunctional shrink should have won an award, or at least a straitjacket. "Do you think it's safe to keep that thing on board?" Juno asked, glancing at the relic now safely encased in a force field that hummed like an angry wasp. "Feels like we're carrying a ticking time bomb. Better on our ship than on a station that's one coffee spill away from a complete systems meltdown," Solon replied. "Besides, the relic's not all bad. It's just got an aggressive personality, like my ex," Lyra said, deadpan, earning a chuckle from Juno. As if the universe enjoyed proving them wrong, the ship jolted suddenly, the lights flickering ominously. Solon cursed under his breath, slapping the console like a misbehaving child. "Not you too, you piece of junk," he muttered, coaxing the ship into a steadier course. Juno looked over. "Maybe it's catching. The station's falling apart, and now the ship wants in on the action." Lyra fished out a data pad, tapping it with the exasperation of someone who'd seen too much go wrong today. "I swear if this ship starts getting emotional on us, I'm out." They all laughed, the kind of laugh that bubbles up when you're knee-deep in absurdity and the only other option is screaming. "So, are we actually going to report this to command?" Juno asked, shifting the mood as deftly as flipping a switch. "Eventually," Solon said, delaying the inevitable like a kid avoiding homework. "But let's make them sweat a little first." "Right, because making your bosses nervous is always a good career move," Lyra quipped. "It's either that or they make us do paperwork," Solon countered. "In which case I choose chaos." The ship continued its journey, leaving behind the debris field that had once been Peace Station. Lyra, despite the day's chaos, looked forward to the negotiations that would follow. The Vyerks might have had a meltdown, but sometimes that's what it took to break ground. Gray Suit and his merry band of emotionally confused aliens were now faced with a choice. Go back to the drawing board or continue trying to play an emotional game with a broken joystick. Think they'll try to simulate emotions again? Juno asked, her curiosity like a cat with 8 extra lives. They'll try, Solon nodded. But I suspect they might think twice before turning the dial up to 11. Well, good luck to them, Lyra said, her voice carrying a touch of sympathy. They're gonna need it. Back in the cargo hold, the relic sat quietly beneath its protective field, a silent testament to the chaos it had unleashed. It didn't care about the havoc it had wrought. It was just doing its job, whatever that was, and doing it with gusto. Solon often wondered about the relic's origins. Who made it, and what was it supposed to do? Unleash emotions as a weapon. A tool for diplomacy, maybe. Or just some alien's idea of a cosmic joke. Must be nice being a cube, Solon mused aloud, drawing curious glances from Juno and Lyra. Just sitting there causing chaos, not caring about the consequences. Sounds like someone I know, Lyra said, eyes twinkling with mischief. Hey, I care about consequences, Solon retorted, trying and failing to sound indignant. Just not enough to stop having fun. Juno laughed, shaking her head. Well, whatever its purpose, it's safe with us. For now, the ship's journey was punctuated by the familiar hum of its engines, the sort of white noise that comforted them like a lullaby. They had faced down chaos and come out the other side, a little worse for wear but intact. As they neared their destination, the looming specter of bureaucracy awaited them. Reports to file, debriefs to suffer through, and doubtless an endless series of meetings where people would say going forward a lot. Think command will throw us a parade? Juno asked, her voice thick with mock hope. If by parade you mean a ton of paperwork, then yes, Solon replied. You know how they love their paperwork. Can't wait, Lyra deadpanned. As the ship approached their destination, Solon took a moment to reflect. The peace station fiasco had been a reminder of one thing: human emotion could be both a curse and a blessing. It had toppled civilizations and saved them too, sometimes in the same breath. Hey, Solon, Juno's voice cut into his thoughts. You think we'll ever figure it all out? You know, this whole emotion thing, Solon smiled, a wry, knowing grin. Nah. But that's what keeps it interesting, isn't it? Speak for yourself, Lyra said. I could do with a little less interesting. Where's the fun in that? Juno teased. As they settled into orbit, the ship's systems began the tedious process of linking up with the station's docking protocols. Solon set the ship on autopilot and turned to face his crew. All right, team, we survived another day. That's worthy of celebration. Celebrate with what? We're running low on rations, Lyra pointed out, always the practical one. Then we'll celebrate with a toast of recycled water, Solon said, raising an imaginary glass. To the chaos we survived, Juno said, joining in the imaginary toast. And to the chaos yet to come, Lyra added, her voice a shade more serious. With their laughter echoing in the cramped quarters, they waited for the inevitable docking procedure. Out there, the universe was vast, cold, and indifferent. But here, within the confines of their ship, they had each other and they had hope. Despite the odds, they'd managed to come through. Sure, the universe had a way of throwing curveballs at them, but that was part of the adventure, part of what made them who they were. And in a universe that was always trying to bring you down, laughing at the absurdity was the best weapon they had. As the ship settled into its docking cradle, Solon leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile gracing his features. They'd done what they set out to do, and they'd done it their way. Welcome home, crew, he said, gesturing to the return to normalcy, or whatever passed for it in their world. Never thought I'd say this, Lyra said, but it's good to be back. Yeah, Juno agreed. Home, sweet hunk of space metal. Together, they exited the ship, stepping onto the station with all the familiarity of seasoned travelers who'd seen it all and still found themselves surprised by the next thing. As they walked down the corridor, Solon couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They were a ragtag bunch, thrown together by fate, but they made it work. In their line of work, that was the real victory. So Lyra started, "You think we'll get some downtime before the next crisis?" Doubtful. Solon replied, ever the realist. "But we'll take what we can get." It was a small comfort, but in the grand scheme of things, it was enough. They might not have had all the answers, and they might not have always agreed, but when it came down to it, they were a team. A weird, dysfunctional, snarky team, but a team nonetheless. And as they walked into the station, ready to face whatever the universe had in store for them next, they did so with the knowledge that they'd face it together. After all, that's what made them human.